So part two of the yin branch, and we're at the beginning of the 12 uh, monthly expirations of each branch, I thought we'd have a look at what's considered a higher physician. And this statement was from Chen Churan back in 1936 that Lu Li Hong mentions in his chapter on the essentials of treating disease. And it says, in medicine, there are higher physicians and there are lower physicians. To see only the obvious and desire a quick cure is the way of the lower physician. To observe the syndrome, investigate its trigger, and harmonize with medicinals is the way of the higher physician. And it may seem circuitous to investigate and harmonize, but it is in fact quite direct. This is understood by the wise and lost on the foolish. So for the higher physician, it says to carefully investigate the disease trigger and do not miss the appropriate qi. And it's this statement and another one that says that unless you know the appropriate qi, you can't call yourself a physician. What really inspired me to go into this study. So what is the appropriate qi? It is wind, cold, summer heat, damp, dryness, and fire, the orderly state of heavenly circulation and related weather patterns in nature. And how then do we ascertain the appropriate qi? Which Lou then goes into this little story, and where he says, let's say that right now, which is true here in my climate, the sky's turned overcast and it is about to rain. In this case, we know the predominant qi is damp. So if a person were to become ill when this qi is dominant, regardless of what illness they have contracted, their malady is related to this dominant qi. If you thoroughly grasp this point, if, as Chibo said to you, do not miss this point, then you have grasped the concept of the disease trigger. This type of qi yi is called external or manifest qi yi. So it's saying that, you know, it's obvious that first aspect of what's happening in nature is what is happening in nature. You know, we bring in so many really obtuse ways to try and come up with a diagnosis. But he's saying initially for the external influence, let's look at what nature is doing at this time.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. There's a different type of qi yi that is not so easily detected, which is called internal or hidden qi yi. This appropriate qi can be discerned from examining the tongue and feeling the pulse. So here's a young lady that exhibiting fire and dryness, you could say. Well, it might not be a young lady, it might be a young man, but and then I did put in some other tongues that we could go through if anyone's interested in looking at tongues, but we'll come back to that later. So in addition to these methods, is there an easier way to determine the qi yi? Well, apparently all 7 of the great treatises of the plain questions discuss this question. I've yet to find out what these 7 great treatises are, so that's work in progress. Here we need to touch upon the specialized field of the study of the 5 movements and the 6 qi, Wu Yun Lu Qi, the study of the cyclical transformation of universal qi. So the heavenly stems transform. For example, the heavenly stems Yi and Gung, so the 2nd and 7th stems respectively, transform metal. So Yi is governed by these stems are characterized by metal movement. To deduce the qi of the year, we look to the branches. 2023 is a Kui Mao year, and Mao indicates that Yangming dryness rules the heavens and Xiaoyin fire resides at the source. This is a term used by Lu Li Hong in his book. Johan Devine told me that the first aspect is the ruler of the whole year, and the second aspect is the latter part of the year. So I'm not quite sure what Lu's meaning again by rules the heavens and the source. It could be that the heavens are primarily the 6 wind, cold, damp, dryness, heat, etc. And the source could be the 5 element relation in the body. Again, that's yet to be determined.
Yeah.
And he says also to deepen the observation of that, we can include the host and the guest. I'm again yet to gain clarity on the host and the guest. I'm pretty sure that they're associated to the timing of the 24 solar terms. I know that the host aspect is a fixed time period during the year, and I'm not quite sure how the guest aspect comes in, but they will again be different attributes of 5 elements or the Lu Qi that are having an effect on the weather at the time. So the summary: observe the weather, identify the disease trigger, determine excess or deficiency of the year, determine the movement in the stem and determine the qi in the branch, determine the stem and branch of the month, day and hour, and how do these harmonize and nourish, control, or diminish the day master in your own Batsa. So in the intro to stems and branches video, I put in there a couple of links for Batsa calculators that you might want to do.
Yeah.
How long have you been in this, or how long since you've left England?
26 years.
Yeah, okay. So
I left in 97.
yeah, okay. So that they say that when you're still in the northern hemisphere, aren't you, though?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's no problem for you. So when you do a Batsa chart for your birthday, birth month, birth hour, and birth year, you'll get a printout or you'll get a chart come up of the 4 stems for those parts and the 4 branches for those parts. And the day stem is called the day master, which is the main component in the chart that is your essential chi, you could say, or is your personality. And all the other elements from the other 7 components in that chart either balance, strengthen, diminish, or attack the day master. So again, we're always going to be looking at the day master in relation of all these other bits of information. Is how is that affecting me directly? And the year stem and the year branch are the essential chi or your constitutional chi. So again, all these aspects have quite a strong effect, or they do have an effect directly on that year stem and branch as well. So once the center point for the disease is determined using the 19 disease triggers, then the principles of the 5 dominations and engendering and controlling can be used to determine the etiology and subsequent treatment methods. So this is from Lorraine Wilcox. That should be down a bit further, her recognition of this, and a link to the PDF of her description of the 19 characters with the Chinese characters as well within it. I don't read Chinese, so I've taken them out. So these, Luli Hong says that the 19 disease triggers are basically completely ignored or put to a very low level of respect and appreciation within Chinese medical education in the world today. He considers them to be vital aspects that actually create a center from which you can then diagnose what's going on. So it's been damp here for quite some time. So disease trigger 10, all spasms and neck rigidity belong to dampness. So this can be our center. Also neck rigidity can contain Tai Yang as well. And rigidity and spasms are going to incorporate wind as well. So there's different aspects. But well, let me go on to the next slide and I'll show you an example we got using number 1. So take careful note of the disease trigger, and in each case observe for that which is associated with it. And then we seek presence and absence. We probe abundance and deficiency, first attend to the 5 dominations, and then open the flow of blood and chi so it is regulated and far-reaching. This will bring about harmony. So in the case of all wind with shaking and dizziness belong to the liver. So if a person comes in, got any of this shaking or dizziness symptoms, we know that the center is going to be the liver.
Yeah.
If they also present with a greenish complexion and a wiry pulse, which are consistent with the liver organ, this is what we call presence. So it's presence of the same symptoms that's connected to the original trigger. When a person presents with dizziness yet has no correlative signs, this is absence. And in this, when there's absence, then we need to attend to the 5 dominations. For example, I'll just get another chart up a sec. How can I have a chart missing out of 81? There is no chart there. So in a situation, let's just see if I've got it in here. Oh, this will do. So let's just say so a person comes in, they're dizzy, they got a greenish hue, the pulse is wiry. Maybe we're in the month of January in the north, or July in the south, and we could incorporate the opposite branch, so the small intestine branch, and this is in particular when there's a neck. So we got dizziness in the head, maybe a little bit of stiffness in the neck. We might incorporate just needling small intestine 3. It's got a direct connection through clock opposites. It's an earth branch. Small intestine 3 is the wood point on the small intestine meridian. It's also useful for expelling external wind. So there's quite a few correlations that we might incorporate to treat that. If the wind is the shaking and there's an internal aspect to that as well, we might decide, well, okay, well, let's just incorporate liver 3. So just small intestine 3 and liver 3 together may be a simple combination for treating that disease trigger when there's presence. If there's absence, then we look at the 5 dominations. So here we place the center is the wood, because we know it's the liver, because they've come in with dizziness or shaking. And then we have the 5 elements around it. So when we're exploring the 5 dominations, we might look at water. So what's going on with water? So is the kidney deficient? So in the mother-child relationship, water gives to wood. So in this situation, the water fails to engender wood. It could be the lungs or the metal element that has an issue. And in the 5-element system, metal controls wood. It could be deficient or excess. So if we balance deficiency within the lung meridian or excess within the lung meridian, then we're going to reduce the over-controlling aspect on the wood. The heart, the fire, is the child of wood. If the heart's deficient, it's going to steal from the wood. So it's going to drain the energy of wood. And if it's in excess, then it's going to reverse Sheng cycle on the mother, and again disturb wood. And then the same with the spleen. Spleen's the wife, or the controlled element from wood. So if spleen's deficient, it fails to engender metal. Metal in turn won't nourish water, and metal also might aggravate or allow the wood element to expand itself. And then if the earth's excessive, it can actually reverse co-relationship, reverse husband-wife relationship, and insult wood. So when we have a center, it's much easier to determine the effects of the other elements on that center, and therefore to apply treatment. Another aspect to consider is that when an illness actually appears. So in the pattern of the year in which the person first notices the illness, that's the most important time. So when we're exploring what's the appropriate tree, we can also examine the year and perhaps the month when the disease was first noticed. And Lou gives an example from a patient that had cancer. It was first noticed in 1994, and he says obviously it's been developing for a long time, but that was the first time it came into appearance. And this year has a Tai Yang influence in the heavens and Tai Yin at the source. Therefore, cold and dampness are the primary contributors to the illness presenting. And this can be of great value when we're determining what approaches we can take with clients, and also to become aware of when these influences are also present during the months and the day. How is that person feeling? What's going on for them? So this is what your Bartzett, or an example of your Bartzett chart, might look like. I think this one is just from a place called Bartzett Calculator. But again, we have year, month, day, and hour.
Yeah.
And what I put this in for was if you're born on the 20th of August 2023 in the Northern Hemisphere, then that's going to attribute to the 20th of February in the Southern Hemisphere, because we're 6 months behind. However, what that does is it kind of radically changes the composition of the whole 4 pillars. Some people say that all we need to do in that situation is change the month. So we can keep this whole chart here, and we'll just get the month aspect from February and implant it here. And this is for Southern Hemisphere only. What I've just started to do is do a printout of the original one, which is, because all calculated, everything's in Northern Hemisphere terminology. So I print out an original one from the Northern Hemisphere. I come back 6 months and print this one out. And then I take the day and the hour and the day from the Northern Hemisphere, keep those two pillars, and then I take the year and the month from the converted Southern Hemisphere one and put them in as a year and the month pillar. See, in this situation, it's the same. But if this was the 4th, or if this was the 4th of August 2023, that's before the new year. So that means that the year pillar would also go back to the previous year, which is a Ren wood stem and a yin wood branch. So that changes it quite significantly. But more of that as we go through. It's a bit confusing for Southern, well, it's bloody confusing Southern Hemisphere. On this site, you also get a 5-element breakdown based on your personal birth chart, and we'll go through this bit by bit each month. This one's indicating that there's 64% metal in the chart for that particular day. So this person that was born yesterday, anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, their day master is going to be metal. So when we configure the chart, we're going to look at what supports metal, which is water, and what drains metal. Sorry, not water. What supports metal is earth, or metal. So lots of metal here supporting it. And what drains it will be water, wood, and fire. So when we do an analysis of this whole chart, we might find out, okay, well, what's the strengths of this particular person, and what are their weaknesses, and what do they have to develop? It does get more complicated because the branches also have hidden stems, which come into play as well. But this is, if we start off with our own Bartzer chart, and as we learn, we can start to apply it on a very personal basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is from the Neijing. I need to improve my translation of the Neijing. I was looking for the 19 disease triggers for quite some time, and I searched my copy of the Neijing, and it's from chapter 74, and it wasn't even in the book. So I'm updating that, and so this translation is from a book which I'm not too sure on its correctness, but just to give a few symptoms of what might be showing up this year. So the Mao year being ruled by Yang Ming, with a secondary influence of Xiao Yin. During the years ruled by Yang Ming, people tend to suffer illness of the liver and gallbladder because the metal phase overacts on the wood phase. So for some people, Bartzer chart, this is going to be beneficial. For others, not so much. And the symptoms may include pain under the right ribs, malaria, contracture of tendons and ligaments, hernia, blurry vision, eye infections, boils, pelvic pain in females, borborygmus, and diarrhea. For herbal people, one should dispense bitter and warm herbs as king, sour and pungent as minister, and bitter herbs as assistant. The latter part of the year, will be a prevalence of alternating chills and fever, skin neuralgia. Shingles is certainly been very present in the last couple of years. So it'd be interesting to see how people in the north whether this stuff comes up more predominantly in this latter half of the year. Chest and abdominal discomfort and pain, dyspnea, photophobia, and toothache. And here the suggestion is medicate with salty and cold as the king, sweet and bitter as minister, and sour and bitter as assistants. And lastly, for this, resolution times. So the nature of the 6 divisions, each has an energetic quality around the circle. There is a chart on the 6 divisions. Number 15. So this particular chart is from a lady called Geneviève Le Goff. Beautiful human being, as I consider. And she's done, well, she does a course called The Circle of Life, which is based around pregnancy and what goes into pregnancy and the treatment of women during or preconception. I've lost the word. Gestation, birth, after birth, all those sorts of things, and she does it from a perspective of what's called the fire school. So it's very much focused on yang qi as the primary issue in the body to maintain and strengthen. And if the yang qi is deficient in any way, that there will show up some problems somewhere in the body. But within that sequence, they have the 6 conformations in this particular sequence. Sorry about that. Starting with the Shaoyin pivot, so the stillness of the Xiao, or actually, yeah, we stay with the Shaoyin pivot. So this is 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. The Jueyin is, we've got 1 to 9 here, but I think it's probably more 1 to 7. And then the Shaoyang is 3 to 9. So in the position of the yin branch, which we're at the beginning of spring, it sits within, it's the last branch for the Shaoyin time resolution, the middle one for the Jueyin resolution, and the beginning one for the Shaoyang resolutions. So resolution times means that during these hours, the energetic of Shaoyin is in nature, is in time. So if there's a person has a problem with a Shaoyin problem, they're likely to improve between the hours of 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. because that energy is giving it strength. So that's why I've just included these in here, just as a again, if for herbalists that work a lot with the resolutions of Shanghai Lun, they've probably already got a lot of understanding of these attributes, and therefore we can start to apply our thinking into how do they associate to the yin branch. Symptoms of the Shaoyin, all cold with contracture and pulling, belong to the kidney. Is the line from the Shanghai Lun on the Jueyin. So I think most people are familiar with that. And for Shaoyang, bitter taste in the mouth, throat is dry, and the eyesight blurry. And that is the end of part 2.
Cool.